One. Hello, everyone. In this video, oh man, it's a true honor. I'm fortunate enough to chat with the fantastic Dean Kavanagh. Dean is an experimental filmmaker from Dublin who has directed 70 short films and 6 features, with his newest feature being Hole in the Head, which is critically acclaimed. It recently came out. If you're involved in Irish cinema in any way, you've probably heard of it. But Dean, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm great. Thanks for having me on. This is
It's,
great.
it's my pleasure. We were talking a little bit off air about the fact that, normally when I talk with people from Los Angeles, it's always about the weather difference. But we're both here in Dublin, so we can both say that it's truly pissing rain outside as we're having this conversation.
Oh, it's absolutely ideally miserable. I actually had a friend of mine who was just over in LA in around a month ago or something, and obviously he's Irish, and he went over and it just pissed rain the entire time he was there. So there's something to be said about taking the weather with you.
They call us is it the look of the Irish? I've heard something like that. I think we bring it with us. But there you go. I mean, it's perfect. It's miserable outside, so what better way to be in here just getting nerdy about film? I mean, Dean, first things first, before we even talk anything hole in the head, what's your origin story? What films did you watch growing up? Was there any film in particular that made you want to be a filmmaker? Because I've had so many different films and responses to this question, but is there one film in particular, or was it a collection of films?
I think it was more like a collection of misremembered films from very, very young, like 7, 8 years
Yeah.
of age or something like that. Maybe Mask of the Red Death with Vincent Price, by John Roger Corman, and the Edgar Allan Poe cycle of films. Mask of Red Death for sure, that terrified me. And Excalibur, John Borman, which I was going to say. I saw those two probably younger than I should have, but
So,
they
so you
made
weren't watching 3 Hours Lawrence of Arabia at 5 years old? Can you call yourself a
it's
filmmaker?
hang on, it's kind of funny, right? Because that was a big film in my house growing up, Lawrence of Arabia,
I
and
watched it for the
that's
first
one I
time.
saw very young.
I watched it for the first time yesterday.
Oh wow, okay, that's amazing.
Very
It's an
well.
incredible film. It's an incredible film. I was just recently watching David Lean, the documentary on David Lean, the one where he's shooting was it Passage to India, and it's about the making of his final film, and it's just fascinating.
Yeah.
Seeing a lot of the way he works on set and stuff. He was quite a private person, so that was kind of magic. But Lawrence is just phenomenal. Yeah, it's an incredible film. Actually, the Irish Film Institute sometimes. I mean, that was one of their kind of early 70 millimeter screenings. Um, yeah, remarkable
Seeing
experience.
seeing that on the big screen would be something, wouldn't it? I mean, there's some films you just kind of have to watch on the big screen. I've seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, but if
Uh,
they ever took that in cinemas, I don't. Maybe the Lighthouse. I'm sure the Lighthouse do something with it. I want to go see that. I don't know. I think Lighthouse do Akira Kurosawa a lot. I want to go up, justify the trip, and just maybe if they do like a triple bill or just a full day of Kurosawa films, I'll literally just go there and I'll just sleep there. I don't care. I'll get that sorted, man. But yeah, it's
yeah, for
interesting.
sure.
You talk about David Lean, and I mean, this is just we'll just go with the conversation. I don't care where we end up. Do you talk about him being a private, kind of a private person in that? Do you feel like that's kind of detrimental to what it means to be an artist? Are you a private person? When you're putting yourself out there and you're sitting in a cinema and everyone else is watching your film, are you kind of like, oh man, what's that like?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think I am a mixture of private and public, but I suppose when it comes to talking about the film that you're probably developing at that time, I tend to be quite cagey about it because it is always the fear in the back of your mind that it's not going to happen or that you're going to jinx the process or something. So there's a little bit of a Macbeth or that Scottish play vibe around anything when I'm kind of doing it. But generally, no. I mean, I used to be quite private when it came to making very small, very intimate personal films with my friends and family, purely because I guess these films are very personal in a way that maybe even only in like recent years I've begun to understand more. But more and more I've become much more open
Yeah.
in terms of sharing about the film or even conversations like this or anything, I think it's good to be open. It's good to
Yeah.
talk about what you're doing and what interests you.
So what's the worst thing that has ever happened, Nominee Man? We'll come up with
No,
different
no.
kinds. That's how we'll get
Like
really
a long
personal.
list. Yeah,
What are
yeah.
you afraid of? What's your biggest fear? How do you think you're gonna die?
Oh.
We'll list them all off, man. This is how I get my exclusive. We'll dig deep into it. Maybe I can get an article out because that's why I do it for monetary gain, not for passion or any of that rubbish. It's just all money, monetary gain. Buy a big house in Wicklow.
Tip my
That's
hat.
a big house in Wicklow, baby. That's the dream. Big house in
That's
Wicklow.
it.
So
That's it. Absolutely. You could probably get the Borman house. I mean, that went up on the market, I think.
that's the dream.
His
Is it
home.
actually? Did you? What was
Yeah.
that like? Where did you kind of? What was that
Well, I'm
shoot?
looking at it and thinking about buying it. No, no, no. It's definitely it's on the market. I don't know if it's sold already or
Did you
whatnot,
have to
but
rent that out, or how did you get permission to shoot on that?
oh, I never shot there. I'm just saying that if you're thinking about getting a big house, the
Oh
Borman
yeah.
house, as far as I know, that was up on the market. It might be gone by now, but you know.
Do you not have that rich filmmaker money? No.
Oh no, 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 no.
What are you
It's just
telling
a
me?
look I
I
exude, you
said, oh
know.
yeah, I taught you. I'm going for the broke look as well. I think it really helps me. It helps me relate with my peasants of viewers. I think the people who watch this. But I mean, I love watching those documentaries. About behind the films. Like I don't know
Mm,
if you ever seen the Magnolia documentary. It was like they shot this. It was all filmed kind of behind the scenes, and that's fascinating to me because Magnolia is one of those films which to me, I don't know if you've ever seen Magnolia, but
yeah.
yeah, it's one of those films to me at least that kind of transcends the media. I mean, people talk about seeing 2001 and having it be
Mm.
that experience. I think the problem for me with 2001 is that every film since 2001 has tried to be 2001. So I don't think I can't see it in such a groundbreaking manner. But I mean, of course, Kubrick has more talent in his left toe than I think I'll ever have in my life. So maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But let me talk. Was there any film, obviously of your various, films that you've seen, was there any film that has actually heavily affected you to such a point that you'd refer to it as one of your favorite films? Is it those films you watched growing up, or was it a film you watched later on in your life?
There are a couple of films. I think one of the films that really impacted me quite heavily was a film by Jean-Luc Godard, the French filmmaker, a Swiss filmmaker, called First Name Carmen. And it's from his second phase, well, technically his third phase, his 80s, his return to kind of cinema.
Yeah,
That was profoundly affecting, just in terms of quite visually just profound and dealing with such big I guess symbols and images, but then also just the way it's cut, the way the soundtrack sits, all these really bold decisions in the edit that are there to kind of interrupt the story. It's a very simple kind of story about two people kind of fleeing a kind
yeah,
of criminal, and this the way he decomposes that story. I almost watch this film, I'd say, biannually at this
yeah.
stage. Quite profound, yeah. And Lawrence of Arabia as well. It's one I think quite a lot about that film because I guess I saw it really, really young. It was one of my father's favorite films, so we saw it a lot growing up.
Was it always 3 hours? Was the version you watched 3 hours? Because my dad was saying there was an hour and a half version he watched growing up.
Is
Maybe
there
you
an hour
don't
and a half?
remember. But
I don't know.
surely,
I definitely saw the long, a long. It was very long. Even as a kid, it was like you could
yeah,
live in this film. It was so
yeah,
long.
mad.
Um,
Maybe. I mean, that's fascinating to me. But yeah, you brought up, I mean, some really fascinating points there. Like one day I'm going to interview Scorsese and I'm going to ask him that question, and then I'm going to follow it up by saying, for me, it's Austin Powers 3, and just see what
oh
he
yeah,
said. Because
Goldmember.
I
Yeah.
just kind of want to see, what he thinks of Austin Powers, which is the big question, which probably just shows why I'm not interviewing Scorsese. But no, you look at something like
Maybe
how,
he maybe he has Austin Powers 3 in his collection at home. I mean, you'd be surprised. Like, I mean, like Bergman had an interesting collection of very commercial films, like the
yeah, did
Blues
he?
Brothers and things like that. Yeah. And even an experimental filmmaker like Stan Brakhage used to go to the cinema, like almost ritualistically, like daily, and he would see absolutely anything that was on. Um, and then, Osama bin Laden, they found, like he was
That's a
interested in
lovely
Chicken
kind of
Little.
segue, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Here we go. Yeah, he had a fascinating collection of American films. So you
Really?
just
Oh,
never
I think
know.
I heard about this. Would you say he was watching Sharknado or something, or Austin Powers? What do you say he got up to?
I'd say he was big into that. Like he was a secret, like hyper consumer of American cinema, like commercial, mainstream
No, I think he was
American
like
movies.
a 16 millimeter. He was a film purist. Like he wouldn't want nothing. Like he's like none of that digital shit. Don't put that in front of me. That's how I feel. Which is our conversation is taking a weird turn already. When you're doing something like Hole in the Head, right? I mean, you make these very like. I mean, didn't Hole in the Head, was it a Camus quote you opened the film with?
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
I mean
sure.
that was
From the
just that was
plague, yeah.
that was amazing to me. So let me ask you this: what work goes into really setting up, a film where you do take risks and you do experiment with it? Because like I asked this to Robert Eggers as well, but it would be a bit different doing like contemporary, like a film about family, and instead Robert Eggers makes films about two lighthouse keepers who want to kill each other. I mean, what changes when you're making experimental films? Is there a different process?
I think that the term experimental is like a really it's a problematic term because it means absolutely nothing and absolutely anything at the same time.
Yeah,
So I suppose the way I've always looked at it is from a very subjective kind of trajectory through cinema. And I think preparation and research, even when I was making extraordinarily just entirely improvised material, there's always a lot of research that goes into it, a lot of prepping, a lot of writing, a lot of storyboarding and diagramming and preparing with performers and actors. And even if there isn't a finite screenplay, there's still a lot of groundwork that goes into it. But I think what's quite funny as well is we just to tangent onto the improvised process, I suppose, which is the way I used to work. Even if you have a very kind of full, complete idea, there's, I would say around like 15% of that idea will survive an improvised shoot. And then
yeah,
maybe
really.
like, yeah, like maybe something even like 4% will come out in the edit. So you really just get 4% of your original idea. Then you have to decide if you're going to kind of impose the original idea onto this, or you're going to let the film continue to go its own way. And for
Yeah.
me, that was the most exciting aspect of making films in that manner, because it was a surprise. It was something that would keep you energized and keep you wanting to know, almost like a spectator of your own work. And for that, I suppose it's just having the openness and having done the research and just consuming a lot of literature and about the ideas that are in the film or music. Music's even better. I mean, you can have such an immediate, direct connection to music that, might be a slow burn in terms of influence from books. So it just depends. But I think preparation and research is something that absolutely goes into it, no matter if it's, Die Hard 3 or, a very experimental improvised film. It's kind of the
How much
same.
trust do you need when improvising? I'd say how much. I mean, acting and filmmaking is a lot. Obviously, it's about honesty. Honesty is something that's inferred that you can't take it away. So, how much trust do you need when making those decisions?
I think you really have to know the people who are involved, the performers and everyone who's in the room and outside the room. And also just having a trust in just the framework of what you hope to achieve by the end of it. And
Yeah,
then just really trusting in the people that you're collaborating with, that no matter where it goes, it's going to go somewhere interesting, somewhere that you are happy for it to go. I mean, that's why you choose your collaborators. It's very important to choose the right people to work with. So yeah, I think that's really important to really know the people you're working with. Or at least if you don't know them, like if it's just a corporate hire or they're just actors or crew that are coming in, it's good to know something about what they've done before. If they're going to be used to working in this way, that you're not going to have any kind of immediate obstacles like,
yeah,
oh, we're doing this. This is not page 15 of, no, it's like, yeah. So, and what happens there as well is you develop, even working then with a screenplay in much more of a structured way, you develop a kind of an insight or like an awareness of how things are going, even from working in such a improvised way, that you're just watching everything. You're just making sure that everything is kind of okay. And that's something that I think you might not get immediately if you're beginning to work directly from the page in the beginning.
yeah.
So yeah, it's
That's fascinating. I mean, I love what you talk about there about the different peoples and the different walks of life. Because I mean, at the end of the day, we can watch whatever film we like. We'll never know what went into it. We'll never be able to watch a film and be like everything went perfect. And it's always amazing to me how some filmmakers can't watch their work. Like Francis Ford Coppola did commentary on The Godfather, and he was like, "Oh, that shot's not good. We could have done it." It's like if he can't enjoy The Godfather, then what are the rest of us doing? Because what are we gonna do? How can we enjoy our films if he doesn't can't sit down and actually watch The Godfather? So is it kind of mad to you that you'll never watch your own films the way other people will watch them? Is that something you think about, or did I just blow your mind?
Uh, a bit of both, I think that's a good point. When you spend so long working on something and living, every time you turn on your computer, it's there looking at you. It's like if you're a
Yeah,
screenwriter or any kind of writer, the dot, dot, dot you've left is just the first thing you think of when you wake up. So you're kind of in the project entirely. And if you're kind of like me, where you're working in a really independent way, where you're shooting this stuff, you're your own data wrangler, you're your own assistant editor, you've gone through all that footage inside out. And so it's constantly on your mind. And space away from it can be really great, can really help. But yeah, watching it again, I think it's great to watch the people when they're watching it. Like in the cinema, I just would watch people. And I mean, I don't do test screenings. I'm doing more and more of this kind of
Yeah,
sharing the work with people before it's finished to get feedback. But in terms of getting a cinema and getting people in there to watch it with test cards and all that, that wouldn't be affordable. But it's always scary when you're in there watching it. And you know what? Some of that experience, and that maybe if in one screening it can be a positive experience, or it can be a somewhat not so much of a positive experience, but somehow that all becomes part of the film. So when you watch it again a few years later, you just remembering those experiences. They all
yeah,
become part of the life cycle of the project. It's strange. It's like a haunting or a tornado where everything just gets accumulated into the process, even if it is exhibition. Which
man.
I mean, like you were saying about Coppola, like what was I watching recently? The Conversation. I watched that again, and I was watching the director's commentary of that. It was amazing, some of the decisions that he made. But I think this was the first time he'd watched that film in a very long time. I don't know what edition of the Blu-ray or DVD it was, but
Yeah.
I get the feeling that yeah, it's a similar vibe. Like he
You
would
can
watch it with
tell
people.
I think if it's a bit of time afterwards, they're a lot more surprised because they always make it worse in their head. You know, they
Yeah,
always think it's 10 times worse than it is. But like, you know, and like I love, you know, when people watch films, like, because I mean, Dublin Diff was on last week, Dublin International Film
yeah,
Festival, and I got to go to, you know, two screen. I wish I got to go to more, but it was just like I used very short notice. We kind of put it all together, but like. I don't think there's any greater feeling in the world than being in a full cinema, and at the end of it, everyone starts clapping at a film, and that's
yeah,
mad to me because every time I
yeah.
go to that Kippy Odeon in my area, the seats are always sticky. They always leave the lights on, and there's about four people in the cinema, and then we leave. No one claps after, so it's just such a kind of united feeling. You know, people have always talked about there being a unity to film, and I've always
Yeah.
understood that, and I've always felt that, but not in such a scale where I'm actually in a cinema and people are cheering and wooing and laughing so
Yeah.
loud. But yeah, and
It's a ritual, like it's like a
yeah,
ritualistic thing. It's like quasi-religious. You're there in this big room, you're alone together with people, and you're staring up at this big altar of the screen, and you're all gonna have an experience together, but a very individual experience in most cases. And there's something that you can't replace that with viewing at home or online. It's something very special about that. You're right, yeah.
And I also, I mean, we're talking there about filmmakers and watching their films. It's always mad to me, and just a fun fact. I just want to bring this up. Do you know at Cannes they boo certain filmmakers if they
Yeah.
don't like their film? That's mad. I only heard about this the other day, and I couldn't believe it. Like, are you serious? Like, would you not even just do it just to be polite? No, even if you thought it was rubbish, would you not just give it the clap? That's what they're known for. Like, imagine making a film at Cannes and everyone starts booing. I think what you do is you embrace the villain and you stand up and
Yeah.
you just start going like that, and you're just like, you know, throwing coke cans at people's heads, and you know, you burn a French flag or something. I don't know what you do, but
Yeah.
you
Do
just
a
you really
venture on it, like.
yeah, you really have to assert yourself in that situation because if everyone's booing you, it's fair game. Like, you know, you showed them your
Yeah.
film, you get to do it. But man, that's mad. Imagine being booed at Cannes. That'd be some feeling.
You'd have to, yeah, it'd be very energizing. Don't know what you do after that. I mean, any reaction's better than no reaction. So, could just be a bad day.
Yeah,
Maybe they saw a really bad film before.
for everyone in the cinema. Yeah, well, there you go. Who knows? Maybe one day one of our films will get booed at Cannes. Should we be
Yeah,
so
that's
lucky?
yeah.
Should
I'd
we?
be very happy with that. Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
that's the dream, isn't it? That's the true and honest American dream. But so something like in hole in the head. How good are you for watching your own films? Do you criticize them afterwards, or is it? Can you objectively sit there and say I'm proud of that, or I like that shot, or what's that like for you? Because we talk about other people. What's it like for you?
I find it very difficult to watch something objectively afterwards. I just see the mistakes. So the mistakes I'd see aren't I mean, I know they're not very obvious. They're tiny things. Like I can see the timeline, I can see the audio or the video, and I can just see a tiny keyframe that I just wish was tweaked, or it's tiny things like this, but it's like what you say, like when you focus on them, it just becomes a bigger thing in your head. So I
Yeah,
try not to kind of think about it, but I don't really watch the stuff again. Actually, here's a funny story. I made a film called Polar Nights in 2014, made with absolutely no money, and I made it entirely in my bedroom over 3 months. So this film is like a found footage film that uses like old British Pathé material shot in the Arctic and the Antarctic, a lot of Shackleton kind of footage. And I combined it all with a lot of old material I had shot that I discarded. And I'd cut it over 3 months. Like I was saying before, you wake up, you're thinking about it. It's like the
yeah.
dot, dot, dot on the page. And then after I finished it, I thought, okay, objectively, this is good. I like this. And then, you know what, I'm just going to cut all of it again, because now I've experienced it. I've lived in it too long. And with found footage, you're just editing. So you're really just, you're seeing the end product as you go along. Every day you watch the same 15 seconds again to find the mistake, or to see if you can nuance it. But then, so I decided to recut the whole thing in 48 hours. So I recut the entire feature in 48 hours. I never watched it until it screened publicly. I think it was a few months later. And that was terrifying. And I actually enjoyed that more, because I felt truly free from expectation somehow. I just felt like I was a member of the audience. Who's that guy? Who made this thing? That's also a funny thing too. You ever go to a festival, or hear people going to festivals, and it's like, when everyone comes out of the cinema, you just kind of say, oh, I wasn't too sure about that. And if it's your own film, like, it's really funny to get people you've never met kind of give you their honest opinion about it. And then someone points you out later, oh, that's Dean, he made it. Or it's like, oh, hey. And then they're just like, oh. So that's fun to do. More of a social experiment maybe, but I've done that once or twice.
Have you just run up and say, why don't you love me, and just start shaking them? Just start shaking them.
Cover myself in petrol, like, yeah, exactly. Right.
You don't think I'll do it? You don't think I'll do it? Tell me you loved it. Tell me one thing you loved.
You saw the film, you know I'm going to do it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, is that weird? Are people surprised to see that you're nice and you're like a regular member of society?
I hope so.
Yeah,
a regular member of society now. I don't know.
Strong. I mean, if you love
participatory,
film, if you love film, it's a strong word to call yourself a regular member of society.
Yeah, we're all weirdos, us cinephiles, man. We're all just a weird bunch of people. Like,
so speaking of your cinephilia, which I don't know, that word always, it brings out the word. I don't know how I feel about that word, but let me ask you, what was like? I mean, the aspect ratios, it kind of changed in this film. You know, in some scenes the frames grew wider. What was that decision like? Because that's something I don't think I've ever seen done in a film before. Maybe I have very scarce examples.
Probably so many times though. Yeah. Well, the idea behind that was, the film is kind of built of a tapestry of different formats. So it's 16 millimeter film, Super 8 millimeter film, VHS, high 8 tape, and so there's on digital. So within the native proportions of, for example, Super 8, it's going to be 1.3 or 4:3. So that's the way that's going to be. So coming, I suppose, from an archival background as well, I really wanted to preserve the true aspect ratio of each individual format, and that the exchange, the moving between the different aspect ratios would almost be like showing the audience subtly, if they notice it or don't notice it, that we're moving out of these different formats intermittently. So that was an active decision, because I could, in films before, I kind of done a film in like a anamorphic, I didn't have a true anamorphic glass or anything, but there's a decision where you can just zoom in and crop to match your scope. And in this case, I just thought it was much more interesting to keep the format true to itself. So that was the reason why that was there. And I've seen films in the cinema which have, like, big aspect ratio changes, and you don't even notice them. Like, if you've ever been to the IFI, I know that's the one cinema I can think of that actually has the curtains, the masking that moves in and out. So there's a film by Jose Cien, and he made a film, it was called The Assassin. And there was the film is entirely, I think it's in 1.33:1, like Academy, I think. And there's one shot that goes wider to flat, which is just like close to 16:9, and it goes back. And I was waiting for it, because there was a little note on the DCP that said to the projectionist, please change the aspect ratio, or change the masking for this moment. And I didn't even notice it happen. It was just, I noticed the masking come back in, but that was a really interesting choice. So I've seen it where, I have not noticed it. And you know what, when you start paying attention, or just looking into the story of Hole in the Head, for example, you forget that it's changing the whole time. Sometimes you notice it on purpose, it's meant to be noticed, but other times you kind of get used to it. So there's a lot of different aspect ratios in it. Yeah, for sure.
Now, what's your experience been with 16 millimeter? I mean, did you shoot that? Was that film? Was that digital replication, or?
No, it's all for real. That was one of the things I really wanted to do with this. I wanted to actually shoot on 16, actually shoot on Super 8, actually shoot on VHS and high 8, and use the technology.
So all your money just went into cameras, yeah?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Well, in a way, you're still putting it on the screen, so...
Yeah, there you go. Art's art.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. Well, I got a 16 millimeter camera from 1971. Bolex, the manufacturer, Swiss manufacturer, and they made their first electronic motor camera. And I got this for like absolutely next to nothing out of a car boot off eBay.
Oh,
And
no way.
yeah, there was an electronic issue with the camera, so it didn't quite work
Oh,
immediately. So it took a couple of months to get it repaired. But the whole idea was to make sure that every prop, every camera prop in the film that is used is actually functional, that actually is
yeah.
recording images. So that was quite important. So yeah, we used 16 for real. And we actually hand processed quite a few sections of it.
You
So
didn't
we were
get
in
it printed in
lockdown.
a lab or no?
We got huge chunks of it printed in a lab. We got it processed and scanned. But for some effects and some scenes, we wanted to do more, but the problem at home, but the problem was we just couldn't with freight and everything. So it was all shot during COVID. So we
Yeah.
just couldn't get chemicals, we couldn't get certain things shipped. And even to be honest, shipping the film out of the country was just took forever.
Yeah.
But there are parts that we processed
Where
ourselves.
you had to do it in England, wouldn't you? In London or something?
Yeah, so we used Kodak and Pinewood and Cinelab and just in London proper. So they were great. They're really
Is there nothing
supportive.
in Ireland?
Not that, yeah, there might be a few, not really, not to that level,
Yeah.
as far as I know. There's nothing to that level now. Super 8, perhaps, yeah. You can use a dark room, and I know there's places that you could just do that yourself. But when it comes to just getting the whole bundle, you're getting the scan, you're getting the
Yeah.
processing, it's going to be, so I mean, that's where people like um anyone shooting on film would go to these labs. So there is a standard to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was fun. It was fun doing all that stuff for real. um yeah, for sure. Like we were using plants and stuff. There's a process called the phytogram process, and it's using the chlorophyll from plants to react with sunlight and the emulsion on the film surface. So we were doing little things like this because that's all we had access to.
Yeah.
And that became a big part of the story as well. It's sort of kind of working with your limitations, I suppose. But really good fun
Nice. Do you
at
think you could have
times.
yeah, at times would you stop? Yeah, if that's work with did you feel like a real filmmaker though, holding that little Bolex camera? You feel
Oh, I
like
did. Yeah, that was it.
yeah, that's why you do it. That's why because I mean someone hands you a Canon, you just smack the lens up against it, you just put a hole and he said, no, I don't want this. Give me an actual camera. I mean, I
You know,
assume that's
it was cool for the actors as well because, as I said, the cameras are props and they're also functional. But the actors in some scenes they're shooting scenes themselves, so it was interesting talking with them and that they're holding these things. They have a weight, they have a presence, and so I learned a lot about that from them because I'm kind of used to it.
way. So some
But
scenes are
yeah,
shot by actors in that.
yeah,
That's
for
my
sure. Yeah,
that's like films like Cloverfield, which is always crazy to me.
yeah.
Like I watch films like Cloverfield, and I don't even know how they were made. Because like
I
how are they doing the shaky cam? What's the lighting on something like that? So it's always crazy to me.
Yeah, Cloverfield, I think though, I still think in Cloverfield and stuff, they have a rig and it's a DOP or camera operator that's using it. And they're just kind of faking by moving the performers in and around it. But in this case, the actors in my film were really literally using the
Yeah,
stuff. And they're being filmed by someone else and they're filming each other. So there's no place to hide. You're kind of you were stuck cutting between the two of them. In one shot though, we were in a really small space and we were filming in a mirror. And I shot most of it. And then when it came to the reflection, we seamlessly as possible put the camera onto the actor. And then it looked like he was filming it. So we
yeah,
did some of the kind of Cloverfield thing as well.
nice.
Yeah.
Do you think you could replicate that 16 mm film with digital? Do you think there's any digital camera and lens you could replicate it with?
You can definitely look at like vintage lenses and there's ways you can go about getting a vintage look, and then you can get like grain packages and LUTs and stuff that you can apply like on your phone. You've got like VHS effect and all that jazz. But to be honest, there's nothing quite like the actual thing, the real thing,
Yeah,
and it's not that expensive to get a little Bolex 100-foot little Bolex camera, like a wind spring round camera and like 100 foot of footage. And it's kind of, if you do it once, if you're into that, you'll definitely want to do it again.
yeah.
It has
Really?
a different, yeah, it has a different
No,
atmosphere to
nice.
digital.
That's fascinating. But so did you use vintage lenses for this or
Yeah, we tried to do so the digital part of the film. I didn't want it to be extraordinarily stark against the kind of grainier, softer VHS, the tape and the film footage. So yeah, we tried to get kind of high end like vintage glass, but it's so expensive. Like it was
yeah,
impossibly expensive. So we did a bunch of weird kind of things in that regard too. Um, we like looked at getting a bunch of stuff on eBay, of course. So, you can buy like espionage devices, like
Yeah.
infrared cameras or something that Russians would have used in like the 80s or something. And you can take the lenses off and you can have them modified to fit a camera body. So you get this really unusual kind of 19th century portraiture look through the lens, by just adapting it. In other cases, you can get these really cheap, again, kind of Soviet lenses, and you can buy a couple of them. They're all like 40 quid each, and you can take them apart. They're quite easy to come apart. And then we can get like little plastic apertures, just little discs, and you can have them laser cut into a different shape or whatever, and you can put that in to the glass and close the lens back up, and then that affects the shape of the bokeh, or the out of focus part of the film.
Yeah.
So we could do little tricks like that. And there's a guy online that I was looking at for a couple of years, and he has a whole channel dedicated to it. And you could do little tricks, like if you get fishing line and tape it to either side of the aperture inside the bit of plastic you've cut, and you color that in with a Sharpie, you can get horizontal flares, like, J.J. Abrams style. And the color of the Sharpie would, announce a warm flare or a colder flare. So there's lots of weird little hacky things you can do. So we're
Nice.
doing kind of all this kind of stuff and trying to use old photographic lenses, because we just couldn't afford the big motion picture 35 mil lenses and stuff like that. But yeah, we tried to keep it as tactile and DIY as possible, because that's all we could do, really.
Nice. So was this true like guerrilla filmmaking, like just getting out there and just making?
Absolutely. Yeah. Right down to even getting out of the house. Because like during lockdown, I wasn't sure the legality of doing anything. So, I
Did you
mean,
make this during lockdown?
yeah, we shot it during 2020 and early 21.
That's
So
mad. Like John Connors, who did the Black Wolf, also made that during COVID. So it seems like everyone was just going out their tree during that too,
yeah,
just
I think
making
everyone just went
films, man.
nuts.
Yeah,
It was a good
basically.
time for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if there was ever a time to make, a work of art, it was definitely. I just sat in my hole all day doing playing Xbox. So really, I kind of wasted that. But maybe we'll get another one. Hopefully, we don't knock on wood, but maybe we will.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, I hope not. Yeah.
Imagine. But
Imagine
yeah.
the sheer amount of films that will come out of it. I mean, it'll be
Oh,
unmanageable. Like,
you'll just go out there again with a camera. You'll just make something, shoot it on your iPhone and stuff like that. But
yeah.
what's that like for you? Are you still experimenting with cameras and doing new things with film every day? Like, I mean, even just shooting on your iPhone. Are you still pursuing new cameras you'd like to use and stuff like that, or do you have a certain type of field you'd like to establish, and do you kind of know what you already want going into a project?
Yeah, I suppose I've on the build up to, I used to make like 2-3 films a week. I used to live entirely in cinema. And um after a while I slowly began to slow down, and less, I'd say the closer leading up to a project, there'd be a phase where I'm looking at cameras again. But I guess as an interest, I have an interest in photography, so I'm always looking at stuff, but less shooting. But yeah, in terms of, yeah, I guess that's something I'll probably look at again, I suppose. Just looking at, I mean, technology really, it doesn't really change on the front end. I mean, there's
Yeah,
cameras like, so when 4K came out, there was already 12K in certain parts. Certain scientific labs had use for it. So really just lenses. I mean, I really like the old look. So in that regard, nothing really changes so much. Only access to them, they get cheaper
yeah.
to acquire. But yeah. I
There's
probably
always
missed the second half of your question. Sorry.
It's all right. I forget it as well. I don't think about everything I say. I don't think about, which just shows on my channel. I just say
Oh,
things.
join me. Yeah.
There you go. See, this is the perfect platform for it anyway, man. But yeah. So I mean, what's next for you? If you could, is there a specific film you're gonna tackle? Are you in pre and something, or what's next for you if you could do anything?
I am developing a film at the moment that is a little step further than the previous film. It's sort of a post-apocalyptic uh, comedy drama, and it's just as weird as Hole in the Head. But again,
Right.
I mean, the way I work generally is I kind of have one foot in the previous project and the leg outstretched going somewhere new, just to keep
Yeah.
it interesting. But kind of looking at that and developing it, and have a producer on board, and it's a long road, but I think the more time spent developing, the better, just to
Yeah.
get it right.
So a post-apocalyptic film set in Leitrim. I mean, truly, that's
You know what? It's
amazing place to
that's
do it. There you
it's
go.
close to the bone, yeah, for
There
sure.
you go.
Yeah, so
I could see
exactly.
it. I could see it in your eyes, just the way you were talking. It jumped at me, and I visually, I can see it in my head. Maybe we'll put a dog in it for funding because they seem to be popular. We
You
will
got to
say
get a dog.
if we
Yeah.
say it's about grief, they'll give us an Oscar. So baby, we're
Yeah.
two for two. I'll take you
I
there,
think
Dean. Don't worry.
trauma is the one this year. Trauma is going to be
Yeah.
out of fashion by the time we get around to next year. So it's going to be dogs and grief. It's all the dogs people got during lockdown that they've just thrown out on the street now. So it's the face of the dog mixed with the grief of the
See, I'll
person
let you worry
adopting it.
about that. You do all the work, and I'll see you at the award ceremony. All right, I don't care for all this art rubbish, all right, whatever. You do all the little man work, and I'll worry about the big stuff. All right, how does that sound?
It sounds great. It sounds great. Yeah,
Put a film
it's a
on
great
my desk.
deal.
Put a film on my desk 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks. Yeah, that's enough.
Exactly. Yeah. If I don't knock the cigars off your desk, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
and the
basically. I
massive
mean,
stacks of
that's what I'm
cash.
saying. Every filmmaker should just have a cigar. Like, you ever see those pictures of John Ford just been putting them away
Oh my God. Yeah.
on the
Yeah. Yeah.
searchers? Like, that's what's
Yeah.
missing now. I mean, everyone's all worrying for their lungs, and the world's gone, woke by people suddenly not smoking cigars anymore. Like, what happened to the good
Oh,
old days where they just start
I,
pounding them back? You
I
know.
think it's funny. It's funny. Yeah, there's such a but what makes it really interesting nowadays is that because it's so infrequent that you see someone smoke on screen, but the moment someone does, you just look around the cinema, you're like, Jesus, they just lit up a smoke in the movie. It has more of an impact now, maybe.
Yeah, and there
It's more of
goes
a
our
decision,
PG rating. There goes our
Yeah,
PG rating
gone. Yeah,
without the
exactly.
cigarette.
Yeah.
So thanks, Dean. Thanks, Dean. We could have put
No
this in.
problem.
We could have really, manipulated that side of the market. I had this all planned out in
Well,
my head.
there's a bit of smoking in Hole in the Head. There's a bit of vaping as well. We got to get the best of both. So there is a bit of that. I'm sure we
All of
got
a
the
sudden,
15s rating because of
all of a
this.
sudden, the childhood audience that we lost, we just got back with the teenagers for vaping. So it all
Yeah,
came full
that's it.
circle. There you go. We'll make some money out of it anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we went completely off tangent. But so something else I'd love to ask you. I mean, what's it like for you seeing Irish cinema and seeing how it's progressed and seeing the people you've worked with? I mean, this year's like a record year. Like I was talking to Jim Sheridan about this. And Jim Sheridan was saying like back in the day, it was like Neil Jordan and Jim Sheridan. There was no one else
Yeah.
really. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
those were the two, and they were just battling each other at the Oscars every year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basically, it was just Jim Sheridan and Neil Jordan. But now
The
there's just
gruesome twosome, like,
oh,
yeah,
oh man,
exactly.
top men, no better men to do it. But so let me ask you, what's it been like seeing Irish film progress and change and evolve?
Oh, it's incredible. It's really inspiring because um it's because obviously there's a market for see, usually what happens in Ireland is like the films that are made here are usually made through a lens uh from the point of view of of America, for example. So they want to sell the image that America sees of Ireland, or whatever big kind of country is going to buy into the release or the film in some way. I think now more and more in the last 10 years or even 15 years, there's been more of an interest in Irish stories, in films that are Irish in ways that aren't so obvious to a foreign market. I think that's really interesting. Like, okay, it's an obvious one, but The Quiet Girl and Colleen Kuhn, that's
Yeah,
an amazing little film. Little film. It's a massive film, but in terms of the story and the intimacy of it, and I don't know how a film like that would have flown, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, even 10 years ago.
and
I
an
think,
Irish feature. I mean, that's the
yeah.
first. I mean, it's not the first ever Irish feature. It's not the first Irish feature ever made. I mean, surely is it?
There's a really great film called Pusheen, which is again is the first wave of Irish filmmakers like Bob Quinn. I guess another guy, Cathal Black, is a filmmaker I really like. Joe Comerford. Joe Comerford is going to have a retrospective at the Irish Film Institute, I think, this month. These are guys that I think that was in my mind, that was when I was when my attention was drawn to their films. It's like, wow, okay, this is like another history of Irish cinema that I never knew existed.
Yeah,
Because I always thought, Irish cinema, for me, I was in two minds about it. You have films like Calvary and I don't know, Michael Collins, and growing up and seeing these films, like, yeah, they're great, but they are certainly leaning towards a more kind of commercial or American view of how how Irishness is, or is expected to be. And films like, as I was saying, Bob Quinn's films or Joe Comerford's films, Joe stuff is screening the IFI this month at some point. That stuff was totally different. It was Irish in a very different way. It was very natural. It's very organic. And like Pusheen, for example, is an Irish language film, and it was a big deal when it came out.
Yeah.
I'll send you a link after this. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's a bunch of stuff like that, but things go in and out of style, like I think we're seeing a really interesting turn in terms of the kind of stories that are the Irish film that's kind of going out. Yeah, here's an interesting one. I always found that looking at Irish makers who weren't necessarily born here, the films that would interest me by people who moved here and are kind of seeing the culture from the outside. And I suppose even with my own films, I was kind of looking from the outside, looking in. I think that's a really interesting perspective as
Yeah.
well. Rather than having the very conventional kind of Irishness, but seeing it as an alien thing is can be quite upsetting to some people. But
Have we
I
gotten
think
much
that's
of
quite an
that? Have we
interesting
seen
point.
those types of films?
I think it's less now, because I think everyone is kind of making the same kind of, there's the drug movie, there's the gangster drug movie, there's the family drama, there's it doesn't particularly matter, at what point you're looking in or out of society, really, when you're trying to make a mainstream film with those ingredients. There is a template as to how you do it in order to sell the film. But I think what's happened now is really small, intimate stories like The Quiet Girl. Um, people are really hungry for them, and they want to see that intimate side to Ireland. And I think it's a side that a lot of people might not have seen before. So that's exciting. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's a fascinating year for it.
I mean, absolutely. I think Irish cinema is only gonna get better. Dean, my last and final question before I let you go: what advice would you have for anyone looking to become a filmmaker?
Oh, this is an interesting one. I would
Watch Lawrence
say
of Arabia every single day for the rest of your life.
that's it. Mainline Lawrence. No, I would say, and this might sound kind of silly, but I think, you know what, it's nice to be nice. I think that's something that kind of I've seen over the years, that it's really just treat your crew well, treat your actors well, treat everyone, your gaffer, your electrician, whatever, treat everyone nice. I remember the first time when I graduated college, and when I left, it was into a recession, and I specialized in cinematography. The first ever job I had was in a bog in the west of Ireland, kind of lifting 32 amp cables out of the dirt. And it was a big production that I won't mention the name of. Had a good time on it overall, but you're kind of outside of the main hub of the production, right? And so, by the time you hear about tea time or lunchtime or even a cup of coffee, by the time that reaches you and you walk there, it's over, it's gone, the food's gone, whatever. And so I remember there one day, and it was freezing cold, and I was just lifting this shit out of the ground. And then I saw, like Lawrence of Arabia, this kind of person, this mirage, this figure form, and walk towards me at the end of the bog, and they were walking for ages. And as they came halfway across the field, I noticed, holy shit, they're carrying a thermos and a cup of instant noodles, and they brought them over and they handed them to me. And I thought, you know what, that's a person I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. So I think, treat people well. I think that's a really, really good piece of advice. Yeah, for sure. And learn as much as possible too. Take on as many jobs as you can in the industry, so you can be somewhat self-sufficient, or you have the ability to talk to the expertise you hire. But yeah, nice to be nice.
Totally. I mean, some amazing advice there. Dean, before we finish up, are you on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, anything like that?
I am indeed. Yeah, I'm on all the social media scenes. Yeah, for sure.
Any
Hook me
new
up.
projects you can promote or talk about? Anything people should go check out?
I don't have anything at the moment. Oh yeah, so well, I'll blast my actors. So James Devereaux, who stars in the film, James is an incredible actor and also writer filmmaker. He's making a really interesting noir kind of film called Composure. So James Devereaux, check him out. You'll find him on Hole in the Head. You find him on my page. Lynette Callahan, incredible actress. She's on the film. She's always doing something really interesting. And I suppose as well, yeah, the Joe Comerford, since I mentioned Joe, go to the Irish Film Institute. I'm pretty sure it's this month. There's a retrospective of his films, and go see them. It's like looking into an alternative history of Irish cinema. So absolutely.
Dude, some amazing. Everyone, go check out Hole in the Head if you can. Go follow Dean on Instagram and stuff like that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Dean, I'll talk to you a little bit off air. Everyone, before we finish up, you can go follow me over on Twitter, DanielFee33 or Sambo1. As always, if you have the means, please make sure to donate to the National Deaf Children's Society. Link for that in the description. But yeah, this has been my interview with top man Dean Kavanagh. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you all in the next video.